welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's such a joy and absolute pleasure to be here.
I was just looking at my notes and it says Joanne, but I've always known you as Jo, so I'm hoping that's okay.
Oh, please do. If anyone calls me Joanne, I think, what have I done wrong?
It's the same when people call me Samantha. I start getting really worried.
Yeah.
So we just printed issue 40 of the magazine, and I don't know if you realised it, but you were in issue 1 like years and years ago, because it was funny. We were flipping through issue 1 thinking who's been around as long as us, and we found you in there. So first of all, thank you for contributing all that time ago.
My pleasure.
Tell us what you've been up to recently. It's been a bit of a confusing couple of years, but what have you been doing?
Yeah, well, since the pandemic struck, as many that would know me would know that we dashed back from the US, not knowing that we were on that last flight out of the USA and expecting to be back there by now. But we've bunkered down in Brisbane where we live, and we've been working on some technology for the industry, which has been really exciting because I managed to attract, and I say literally attract, some partners over there who were looking to create a workflow program for property management. And we were trying to do the same thing. And we thought, well, we know what's needed, but we don't know technology. And literally out of the blue, someone approached us wanting to know if they could work with us on this. So that's what we've been doing during the pandemic.
Yeah, it's actually a good time for doing that sort of thing, isn't it? While you can't actually necessarily travel and see people the way that we're used to, it's good to come up with something new.
Exactly. Yeah. And especially, because I am someone who my mind is constantly on the go. And I think I would have gone stir crazy if I didn't have something to work on.
That's how I've certainly known you, coming backwards and forwards from between Australia and the US for a number of years. How did you get involved in the US property management market?
Yeah, when I first started in property management, I felt that there was something I could do to, have a deeper understanding of property management and be part of a change that I felt, was necessary and needed to come. And as part of that, my own thoughts were I need to know everything about real estate. It's not just property management. I need to have the overall big picture. And as luck would have it, at that time we got sent to Papua New Guinea, and that's a place where you don't do property management. So I used that time to learn more. And from there we moved to New Zealand, where I had the opportunity to work in sales. But as part of working in sales, I had to do this paper at the Open Polytechnic, and I wrote on global real estate. So this was before the internet and all of that. And I talked about people being able to just shop for real estate online. And that kind of opened up my mind to the possibilities of, can I actually become a global agent? And, not long after that, I ended up, finding that there was a course that I could do. I did my certificate as an international property specialist. And through that, I started to network with a lot of agents from around the world. And the more I went to the US, the more I could see that there's these amazing opportunities. And it just grew into me traveling there probably every 6 weeks, to the point where I then moved there and just loved it.
And what are some of the differences that you see between the Australian market and the US market?
Yeah, one of the biggest things, and if I, focus on property management, is the fact that over in the US, a lot of sales agents actually do their own property management. But property management to them is more like collect the rent on the owner's behalf, so that they can save them fees in management, and bypass a trust account. So it's not done very well. And tenants fail to report maintenance. So I saw enormous opportunities to go over there and assist with kind of different ideas so that they could bring it in-house. And they actually avoided having it in-house because of all of the liability and things like that. So they're so scared of being sued. It's like all you need is processes and a proper plan of management.
Yeah, so in Australia, it's more regulated than literally anywhere else, yeah?
Yeah, it's very regulated in a more succinct manner, whereas in the US, they've got a lot of legislation that actually creates a lot of fear amongst agents. So the legislation, when I really looked into it, they saw it as something that, could potentially bring them undone, which it could if they didn't have the rights. This is the same in here. But, legislation to me is common sense. So if you remove the fear from legislation, then, you'll be able to, build a great service and one that is not risk-free. There's always risk in business, but, you can mitigate risk.
What do you think at the moment about what's going on in Australia with some of the discounters like Different and things like that have made some big moves this year? How would you suggest competing against agencies like those?
Yeah, well, this is something I really love to chat about because I think there's a place for everyone. There are people who just focus on whatever the cheapest fees are, and that's okay. It's like the airlines; they've competed very well in the air with the discount airlines, and people will fly at the cheapest rate and pay the extra for baggage and not get drinks and nuts on the plane, whereas others want the full service. And I think it's the same in property management. You will always get the people who are willing to pay a fee for service and results. But if we don't know how to communicate that, then they don't know what to expect from us. So, yeah, I think, we all need to understand where our place is, and there's a place for everyone.
It's like the Uber argument, isn't it? I mean, some people will always be Uber X's, whereas some people like the Uber Comfort and the Uber Black. And
Absolutely. And Sam, it's like, if you go to the grocery store, there's a plethora of products, all different brands. But we have our brand that we love, and baked beans is a good example of that. How many brands of baked beans are there? But most of us will go for the Heinz baked beans, which is the most expensive. But we know that it's we can rely on its consistency, good taste, and there's a good ad for Heinz baked beans.
yeah, that's it. We've all been singing the song since we were kids.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah. So if you were starting a property management business right now, what are some of the things that you would be focusing on?
Yeah, well, I think, when you start a property management business, what you need to do is know your why. Why are you actually in the business? And I always say, if you don't know your why, then you'll never discover what your how is. So if you know your why, how are we actually going to create this business and make sure that, whatever we do is sustainable? Because one of the biggest challenges we have in property management is growth. And that's not new growth, it's retention of business. So, you bring in new business, but you're never growing. So it comes back to when you start a business, start with the right tools and make sure that you are ready to scale, as required. And, invest in, new resources as required. And I think because a lot of companies start with like, let's just get it going. It's kind of a little bit of a desperate start instead of a deliberate start. And this is even something I learned through my Disney training, is always be hyper intentional in everything you do. And I think that's what's missing. So be hyper intentional, have the nuts and bolts in place.
Yeah, absolutely. So I did want to dig into this Disney training that you've had, because you recently wrote an article on what agencies can learn from, well, some of the big brands like McDonald's and Disney. But what were some of the big takeaways from your training at Disney that you can transplant into the real estate world?
Yeah, well, when I did my Disney training, it was like a complete shift in my mindset from doing that, because what we see at Disney is magic everywhere, but we're actually taken behind the scenes where we see all the things that are going on to create the magic. And one of the biggest things at Disney is the processes that they have. Everything is process driven. Nothing happens without a process. and they never break that process. It's, they never compromise on process. They never compromise on safety, but process is part of the safety. And, we would do our lessons at the Institute and then actually be taken into the park to see firsthand, how that translates to what happens in the park. And I think something that really opened my eyes is understanding that, when people go to Disney, they will pay sometimes thousands of dollars to tens of thousands of dollars to go there, and they might only have 2 days, 4 days in the park. But to get around to all the rides means you've got to actually line up for the rides. And, some of those lines can be 2 hours, or I was in a ride once for 4 hours. And I love observing people. And, what I saw is people already had the expectation that they would have to line up to go on this particular ride. They also had the expectation that Disney says safety first. So if that ride breaks down, it stops until they've got it working again. And, quite often I would be in lines where the ride would break down and people would just disperse and, be whistling and singing as they go off to the next ride. And not complaining. Whereas what we have in our industry is if we are not immediate on things, we have this complaining and clients expecting things to be done, absolutely immediately, drop everything. And so to me, it was, setting expectations for the clients. And I think that's, one of the biggest lessons I took from Disney, apart from the processes. And if you've got the processes, you can set the expectations. So people will work with you.
There's so much to unpack in what you just said, which was amazing. It is really interesting because I'm sure some people think about our business too. They see the nice glossy magazine, but they don't see any of the stuff that goes on behind it. And I guess similar to what you just said about Disney, how do you get that effect in property management that people just think, oh, wow, this is it, but they don't feel all of the other stuff going on underneath?
Yeah, and I think, Sam, what it comes back to is us knowing who we are and us knowing then how to set expectations and create our own cultures. So people will, I don't like to use the word buy in, but they kind of like infuse with that culture. The same as that feeling I get when I'm at Disney. It's like, it feels like when you walk under the railway track and you enter Disney, it feels like it's like all of a sudden you're hit with this energy. And Disney created that. So, it's up to us to create that with our clients too. But if we don't have a business that is hyper intentional, if we're constantly, desperate in what we're doing and just doing things band-aid, we can never be deliberate in our actions. So, a lot of companies work with this desperate reaction instead of deliberate actions. And when you understand how to work, to be deliberate in what you do, you'll find that clients, team, everyone is happy. The business owner is happy. It's like, because they know what to expect from their business.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing is the expectation setting, which is, doing what you say you're going to do. Well, actually, it's even more than that. It's actually letting people know ahead of schedule. What are some of the ways in which you think property managers could better set expectations for both tenants and for investors?
Yes, well, I think, the first thing is that clients need to know that you cannot get back to them immediately. Property manager's job is out of the office most of the day. If they're not out of the office, they're not doing their job properly. So, when they're out of the office, they shouldn't be taking calls. They shouldn't be looking at emails because they should be at the office logging details of the call and email to the software that they use. So, by clients understanding that and knowing that they'll be given a time when they'll be responded to, clients will meet those expectations. But the other thing is that, clients understanding that it's not one person who's managing their property. There's one person who's assigned as a responsible portfolio manager, but it is the company, it is the team that's looking after that client. So I think, another area where we fail in property management is not helping the clients to understand they're not dealing with one person, they're dealing with a team. It's a team behind them, and anyone in that team can help them. And I think if we set those expectations, the clients will work with us.
One of the very first articles that you wrote for us was an article on what is the best structure in property management, and it was a really great article. Actually, I'll get the gang to link it up in the show notes again, because I think it's one of those timeless things that, is it task or is it portfolio or is it some sort of a hybrid? If you were setting up business today, do you have a favourite model today?
Well, I think, the favourite model is always portfolio, where you've got someone who is responsible to, the client. But then what we have to understand with portfolio is, in order for our businesses to scale, that portfolio will grow, so it will have an assistant who's learning everything. And this is what other businesses do to scale. That person will learn everything. So it becomes a pod. For a little while. And when that person has learned everything about the culture of the business, the policy, the process, the protocol, the practices, all of those things, then that team member is ready to have their own portfolio. So that pod, the portfolio that grew into a pod, is now ready to be split back into a portfolio. And I think that's where a lot of companies go wrong, is that business is not something that is just solid. You've got to be very fluid and flexible with growth. And that way you'll learn to scale the business and, have retention at the same time.
Good answer. I think that covers all of the options that you had in that article all those years ago. So we talked about Disney. Now I'd like to talk about McDonald's, because you recently talked about McDonald's and consistency, and there's a lot of people in the industry that think that we can learn a lot from McDonald's. What do you think are the big lessons from the golden arches that we can take away?
Well, let me first say I don't eat McDonald's.
No, me neither.
No.
Except with a hangover.
I think that's a given. But it is something that, regardless of if we don't eat it or not, a lot of people travel a lot, like I do. And if you're somewhere where you don't understand the cuisine of that area, you see McDonald's and you think, at least I can rely on that. And, one of the things with McDonald's is, regardless of where they're located in the world, and regardless of, who's serving them, what we all understand is McDonald's is consistent in every way. And the only thing that changes from one restaurant to the other is the community where they're located. So they might have, an influence of what that kind of, dietary, like is in the area. For example, there's a lot of cinnamon.
Chili sauce in Malaysia. Yeah, I lived in Malaysia for a while, and you would, handed the sauce chili with your Big Mac. Yep.
Exactly, that's right. And McDonald's has been very, very good at bringing in kids, 14-year-olds, and that 14-year-old behind the counter is, consistent with, asking you, do you want to upsize that? Would you like this with it? Would you like that with it? And they don't hesitate to ask the question, and they stick to the language. Language is really important in all industries. You see, Disney's got their own language, McDonald's has their own language, Starbucks. So, that's what helps with creating consistency as well. But, they've proven that you can train a 14-year-old, and that 14-year-old represents everything that the brand says it is. And the burgers, what I always say in my training is, anyone who's maybe worked for Burger King or Hungry Jack's, I think in Australia, if they work for Hungry Jack's and they go and work for McDonald's, and they'd say, well, at Hungry Jack's or Burger King, we built the burger this way. McDonald's is very, very, strict on, this is the way we build a McDonald's burger. And that's the way we'll always build a McDonald's burger. So right down to the burger, or the way that the fries are made, or the shakes are made, it is always consistent. And that's what people rely on, consistency. So, yeah.
Because you know what you're going to get.
Exactly.
again, you just reminded me of, my early career. I used to drive around to legal offices like in all sorts of areas of Australia installing networks. And come to think of it, I used to always go to McDonald's because I knew that the toilets would be clean,
There
like when
you
I was
go.
traveling a lot.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's that
Yeah.
consistency in everything that is important. And if we have that in property management, that's what clients come to rely on. And it kind of like becomes a safety barrier for them. So or a safety, like something that they can lean on. So yeah.
Yeah, it's good advice actually, so that the client gets to know you and sees you as a safe haven to pull into in effect.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, we've been talking to a lot of BDMs lately, and one of the problems that they consistently say crops up is this fee conversation. Like they'll get a client calling them up saying, I'm looking for a property manager in effect. What are your fees? Like, and it's the second question that they ask. Can you give us some idea of some tips and strategies to like open a conversation instead of just going, oh, I'm part of an Excel spreadsheet here you go, it's 8% or something like that?
Yeah. Well, I think, it's natural for everyone to, want to know what the fees are. And I think in general, people think that they need to ask about fees because they see us all as being the same. But that's our opportunity to actually shine and ask the client something different when they ask, what are your fees? And my first response would be, I would love to know why you've got this rental property, because not all owners are the same. Not all rental property owners are investors. Sometimes it's their own home that they can't sell. So what's your reason? Because unless I know your reason, then, I won't be able to service you. Because what I like to say is I'm the how to your why. So what is your why? And that opens up conversation because they're thinking, well, you're not like everyone else who just, blurted out the fees and almost apologized for charging those fees. And, if you don't know your own value, you can't share your value. So there's no way that you can, kind of like promote the value in what you do if you're not believing in it. If the first thing you have to say is that here's our fees, but if someone else has offered you something else, then we'll drop our fees. Because, that's a lot of the conversations we're hearing, and part of the training that we do when I work with, I call them growth managers, is I call the competitors with them and get them to ask that very question to see what the response is. And it really is almost like they're apologising. So the clients are not seeing something different. So I say, share your difference. And so I actually say, share, shine and show. And when you share, shine and show, then clients will warm to that and understand, you are different. So, please, share more about what you can do for me. And the other thing is, it's not the fees, it's the results that matter. So know your numbers, and you'll know, Sam, I write a lot of articles about numbers. It's all about the numbers. And if you sit down with the clients and, do some quick maths with them, and you can even do this on Zoom using a whiteboard and, share with them what the net result will be. So if they were charged the lower management fees and then the higher fees, what their net result will be based on your, achievements in the market area. So, you've got to know where you sit in your market and be confident in promoting that and the benefits to the clients. So, know your benefit and value to the clients, and their focus will shift. You can almost feel it shift from, the fee conversation more to, what you're going to gain for them.
What can you do for me? Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Again, some of the people I talk to, you say to them, what's different? Obviously you need to articulate the value and articulate the benefits and things like that. Where would you start if someone said, and a lot of agents say this to me, you see it on LinkedIn profiles, I'm passionate, I'm trustworthy. and expect that to be the major point of difference or the major thing that customers see value in. For me, I feel like that's just a ticket to the show. That's doing your job. How do you guide property managers who might be struggling to find their point of difference?
Yeah, well, the point of difference needs to come from the company that they work for. And then they have to be totally connected to the point of difference for that company. So it comes back to the business owner and, the business owner being able to, one, find what their point of difference is. And that could even be just, their community focus. So, they're so focused on that community that they're so focused on getting the best results for everyone in that community, because if they get the best results for this person over here, it's going to mean that this person over here is going to gain as a result of that person getting the best results. With that conversation, I then talk about my concerns about properties that are managed by other agents who are not focused on getting the best results and how that impacts my clients. So by talking about community, which is what real estate is all about, it's about community, that's a way to find the point of difference. Or, understanding that you are not going to be attracted to all potential clients out there. You don't want everyone. You want the ones who are going to help your brand to shine as much as you help them to achieve the results that they're hoping for in property management. So I think, if we understand that we want quality over quantity, and quality means those ones that we really want to work with and help and support, then you will start to, as a result, stand out. But I think, Sam, if we start to, look at other industries where there's a lot of competition, like airlines, hotels, even taxis with, the Uber, we can learn so much from that. Restaurants, it's not about the cheapest. It's about the ones who really know what they're delivering to the clients. And once you know that, then your team can articulate that and represent what that brand is all about.
If I could summarise that a little bit as well and play it back to you, it's what you're saying is your ideal client is not everyone.
That's right. 100%.
Yeah.
In a short sentence, that's exactly it. And they want everyone. They go for this kind of like shotgun effect, and they don't even understand where their market boundaries are. So, as a result, what they're doing is they're devaluing their business, they're devaluing their service, they're, watering down their brand, and they're reducing profitability in everything they do. So, it's really understanding what is my business all about and creating that culture and that reputation by design.
Yeah, that's a really interesting topic we could sort of talk about for hours, actually.
Yeah. One of my favourites.
Yeah, totally. So we talked about your global experience at the beginning, and I think, and also about your goal to empower property managers and affect positive change in the industry. What are the main things that you would like to see change moving into 2022? Like if I could call the guy in the big red suit and say, Joanne would like some stuff for the property management industry, what would it be?
Oh, that is such a loaded question. Well, I think the first thing is I would love for property managers in general to embrace accountability. And I think if they embraced accountability, they would find more enjoyment in what they're doing, just through that switch in mindset alone. And by embracing accountability, I think that kind of like then brings in so many other things like technology and how technology becomes a tool for what they're doing and not the be all and end all. I find it really funny how our industry promotes the technology that they're using. Yet, we fly, we go into banks, we go into restaurants. We've got no idea what technology they use, but our industry seems to like to promote the technology. So I'd like to see a change in that where we, promote more about what we're doing And for property managers, in embracing accountability to then embrace incentives for what they're doing. And I think if we have incentives, incentives become a win-win. We're winning for the business that we represent, and we're winning for those clients that we're serving. And, at the same time, we're earning a, pretty good salary and other incentives. I mean, incentives is not just money. Incentives can be flights and holidays away and all sorts of things. So I think if property managers in general embrace more about what property management is all about, we're a service industry. I've always said we're like the stockbrokers of the real estate industry. To become, someone who's knowledgeable about the market, we're going to see a magnificent shift in our industry.
Yeah, I think so too. There seems to be like a movement of more maturity and more, upskilling and things like that, which is something I think to look forward to seeing.
Right. Yeah.
So what's ahead for you for 2022? What is on your goal list?
Well, the big goal is we hope to get back to the USA. So as soon as we know that there's stable borders, we'll head back there and continue to get on the road and do our masterclasses and get our little dog that we had to leave over there. So we miss her dearly.
Yeah.
Continue to roll out the new program that we developed during the pandemic, which is, as we speak, we're rolling it out now. And, we've had such wonderful feedback from that where everyone is saying, this is a no-brainer, and we've made something, that is complex into something that is very simple. So I'd love to see that, rolled out and just in general, I can't wait to go back to conferences again and yep. and speak and share and I just can't wait to get out there and mix again.
Yeah, I think you're not alone there. I think everyone's gagging to get out there as well, me included. I miss the US too, and I didn't even live there. So
I just can't wait to get back.
Yeah, amazing.
Not to say I don't love Australia. I love Australia, but
Yeah, there's all of those shops and pizza.
Exactly.
Just to name two things. But anyway, I would like to, Joanne, I'd like to thank you for coming on today and sharing your knowledge and catching up with you. And please do let us know when you launch your product, because we'd love to have a look at it. I asked this final question of all of my guests, which is, if there was one final piece of advice or takeaway to leave everyone with, what would it be?
Well, I say that you have to love what you're doing. And if you're not loving what you're doing, then you might be, doing the wrong thing. And that's not to say that working in property management is not the wrong thing. It's find what you love doing in property management and, find the joy, and the joy is going to guide you through life. And just know, whatever you do, there's going to be those days when you think, what am I doing? Do I really want to be here? And know that every time that happens, it's just a lesson for you to, take you to the next level and the next level. So find the joy.
Great lesson and great advice. Jo Oliveri, thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thanks, Sam.